Hi, welcome to this channel on magnetic energy technology principles applications. This video is about producing electricity with these neutral magnetic devices. Of course, this is unconventional information, and there's a future theme kind of in these videos, like this is going to be done in the future. Ironically, all this information comes from the past, but I'm going to describe briefly how electricity will be generated in the future when necessary. There may be certain uses for having electricity even in the future with a magnetic age. And so, but how would you do that? And how would you do that without burning like fossil fuels and without chemical reactions, without stealing electrons from the environment, and then in this model creating all kinds of havoc with the ionosphere and the ozone layer and everything else that electricity does that is so harmful in terms of resonance for this planet. And that's all like in this magnetic model that I've talked about in other videos. So first of all, it's in this particular etheric magnetic model, we cannot extract electrons from the etheric field. And so that really kind of puts us into a quandary as far as like how are we going to then produce electricity safely. But we can replicate the conductors of electricity at very high speeds. And so that kind of becomes the key to having free electrons. And so the other thing is in this futuristic type of technology and in this model, electricity should and will always be a byproduct of relatively neutral magnetic processes. And so and so that's really important that we understand that electricity it's going to always be the byproduct. Okay, so ideally your situation would be like you have a magnetic device that essentially runs itself. Okay, and then you have electrons that are sourced from continuous replication of conductors through like a never-ending supply of etherically generated neutrons that are essentially they're converted into the structural polarities that compose the conductors. And so that's kind of the theory of this, and I'm going to describe a very simple type of circuit that you would do to get these free electrons, and this would be fully renewable. And so you would start essentially like with a helical coil in a clockwise rotation. So you're going to have like a helical coil wound in a clockwise rotation that extends along a conductor to another helical coil that will be in a counterclockwise rotation. So they'll essentially be opposite, and then at the same time they'll have you're going to oscillate or vibrate, if you want to say, or resonate those coils, and you're going to do that magnetically. So you cannot use, if you're going to try to do this right now with today's technology in this particular model, you cannot use electricity to resonate those coils because it hampers the etheric flow, and we need a very clean, clear etheric flow. So we're going to resonate those coils with alternating, pulsing, spinning magnetic fields, and one's going to go one direction to match that coil, and the other magnetic field is going to like basically rotate in the opposite direction, and the pulsing of those is going to be like 180 degrees out of phase. So we want out of phase pulsing. So now what happens when you set up that kind of circuit is both of those coils and the entire conductor become very alive and active. They are essentially pulsing in and out of our third dimension, if you want to call it that. And so that makes their free electrons continuously available. So how that works is essentially you have the conductor and the coils, they're resonating at, and you could say it's you got 10 to the ninth power for a true per second of true resonation of copper, but you can hit any harmonic of that. And so when you're dealing with like neutral magnetic pulsing, you're gonna basically hit a harmonic of that, and then so you are activating the conductor, making the electrons free. So your reaction point, which would be like a light bulb or whatever else that you would be running electronically, will be in the middle of that circuit. And the electrons and the flow, if you want to call it the flow of electrons, even though it's they're basically just throughout the entire conductor. There's really no true flow, except in this model we actually get more flow than you do in a traditional model, because there's an attraction. There's a mutual reception of attraction between the two coils that are basically going inflow outflow and rotating in opposite directions and creating a mutual attraction between them with electrons. And then that, when you have a reaction point, like some device that's utilizing those electrons in the middle of that circuit, you are basically utilizing the electrons. Now, there's some differences between this and conventional electricity. So first of all, this is essentially like cold electricity. So your conductor never really gets hot. Okay, and it's also, we are working with the potential of energy, so it's on-demand electrons. So you're not like sitting in a house full of hot wires. Essentially, the device will provide whatever electrons are necessary for its use on demand. So it's almost like the potential, you're living in a world of potential, and then as you create the reaction, you are instantly given all the electrons that you need to furnish that reaction, if you want to put it like that. So there's minimal resistance in the conductor. And so that's really a big deal, because now you can have conductors that are extremely efficient compared to today's standards. So we are really changing the nature and the role of like resistors and capacitors in this model. So there's some electrical engineering needs to be reworked in terms of devices and everything, because we don't necessarily need the same resistance and capacitation that we do in conventional electricity, because we're working with an on-demand system that will only provide what is necessary. So the reciprocal attraction of the electrons between the oscillating coils is the key to having sustainable electron reactions. And so as we're essentially replicating the conductor over and over and over and over at a very high speed, and that's a very powerful thing. It's a I can't even tell you how important this is going to be for certain devices in the future that we want to run on electricity, if you will. Now, of course, as we move into the crystal age, then you will have conductors. It could be copper, silver, gold, whatever it is, but you will have crystals that are seeded with those conductors that continuously oscillate or resonate at the proper frequency of that conductor, providing you with free electrons just straight from a crystal source over and over and over. But until we get to that point, you can build these types of circuits that will essentially do the same thing, and that'll give us the ability to run devices when necessary, or do there are other applications for this, but that will give us essentially free, never-ending electrons from conductors. And so please send in any questions that you have or comments about this. And I know it's a lot to throw in such a quick video, but it is something that is very important for the future. And the future literally could be tomorrow using this technology, because it's so much more effective than the conventional method for producing electricity and for producing free electrons that we can use in a conversion process. So with that, I will see you next time.